In Crosby Beach, just north of Liverpool, there is the largest work of art in the UK. It's a series of 150 sculptures, life-size sculptures of the artist who made the piece, Sir Anthony Gormley. There are 6 casts. They are all versions of these 6 casts, and they are rooted firmly in the sand on that beach, but at different stages. They go down about 2.5 kilometres across the beach and up to half a kilometre out into the sea. So some are always partly covered by sea and some are rarely covered by it. For the tide comes in and goes up these figures twice a day, as the tide does everywhere. They all each have a very different story, as they wear at different rates, with different marine life sticking to them, different vandalism from people out passing them. Some of it is gentle mocking, some of it is quite serious vandalism. None has been stolen yet, though some have tried. But some are wearing out, some are rusting, and they have different colours depending on how the wind and the rain and the sea life has attached itself to them. They're all different, but they're all looking in the same direction. Every one of them is looking towards the horizon. No matter what happens before them, in front of them or behind them, they never take their eyes off the horizon. And when Sir Anthony Gormley chose a name for this piece, he called it Another Place. Because every one of them is looking for somewhere better. Another place, just beyond the horizon, just beyond reach. They're all looking for something that they can be sure about when even the sea changes every day, as people come and go. They're looking for something they can be certain of, just as we are in these most uncertain of times. This week, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, announced the most significant easing of the lockdown restrictions since it began on March the 23rd. The government is understandably nervous of the effect on our economy and is looking, well, to free up opportunities for business to see the wheels of our economy begin to turn again, and so therefore then generate the tax revenues that finance everything from our schools to our roads, our armed forces, our bin collections, the police, as well as our beloved NHS. But many restrictions still remain in place, of course, as does an understandable fear of catching the virus amongst the most vulnerable of our society. Lifting the restrictions too soon could cause spikes in cases and put us all right back where we were in the worst of days in April. So we may still be faced with tremendous changes to our way of life for months, or even longer. Change is therefore going to be necessary to get the economy and life moving again, but that will mean huge changes in many large and even more unsettling in many, many small ways. Every aspect of life will be affected, as it already has been, and this will continue to make everything feel unsettled for some time to come. I suspect that the newest easing of restrictions will not bring the sense of normality that I think many are hoping for. And as a consequence, we may feel a greater sense of uncertainty about the future. This may not be over as quickly as we had hoped. The Great War of 1914-18 was expected to be over by the first Christmas, but we know how far from reality that was. So with so much uncertainty over even the smallest of hopes and plans, I want to take today and the following 3 weeks to focus our hearts and our minds on the things that we can be certain of. I want to focus on the things that we truly believe and need to believe in the middle of the greatest crisis the world has seen in our lifetimes. I want us to take hold again of the things that we can truly depend upon, when all around us nothing seems reliable or dependable or solid. In Scripture, in the letter to the Hebrews, it says this in chapter 13, verses 7 to 9. I paraphrase slightly. He says this, the writer, "Never forget what your teachers first taught you about Jesus, and remember how they lived it out and what it cost them. It is still true today, for Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So don't get distracted by some strange teaching," he says. I want to guide our thoughts back to the foundational certainties and then perhaps build firmer foundations within our Christian lives, within our churches. Firmer foundations of what we truly believe. We've learnt over the last 3 months, haven't we, that our churches are stronger than we thought they were, and yet we haven't used a single building for 13 weeks. Our existing relationships and our new ways of keeping in touch, our new teams volunteering in new ways, have kept us in touch and enabled us to share our hopes and our beliefs more effectively in some ways than we have done for years. And it does look as if God is rebuilding his church in a fresh way. So let's ensure that our foundations in this new building, this new way of being church, our foundations are secure. And let's not get distracted away from the knowledge, confidence and hope that we have in the God of Jesus Christ through his Holy Spirit. Good foundations are simple, but they are deep. And I want to shape the few weeks ahead with, this week, the simplest of stories, but a story that I believe has real depth. I can, of course, explain all the theology, and I can use all the technical language that I was trained. I was well trained by the Methodist Church. But I prefer this story. I prefer this modern parable. I prefer Jesus' way of teaching. A young child, a young boy called Jackie, he lived with his mum in the centre of a big city, about 4 hours' drive from the coast. Each year, They had their holiday together near the beach in a simple cottage way down in the south. Jackie and his mum really looked forward to their holidays in the cottage, and they really enjoyed the short walk from the cottage down the lane, past the shops, crossing the gentle stream over the little bridge, through the field and onto the beautiful sandy beach that they went to nearly every day whilst on holiday together. It was their big treat for the year. Money was a bit tight. And Jackie particularly loved the freedom his mum gave him whilst on holiday, a freedom that she felt unable to give him whilst they lived together in the big city. This particular year, they arrived late in the evening. Jackie said, "Can I go out to the beach?" "Oh no, my dear," she said. "It's far too late and nearly dark. But you can go first thing in the morning tomorrow." So Jackie was up very early the following day, just as the village was opening up. He walked down towards the beach, imagining the walk from the cottage, down the lane, past the shops, crossing the gentle stream, over the little bridge, through the field and onto the beautiful sandy beach. But as he went past the handful of little shops, he noticed in the window of one of them a large box, angled and placed right near the front, with a picture on the lid that took his breath away. With bright sunlight on it, it was the most beautiful sailing boat he had ever seen. Powering through the ocean, the boat seemed to be skimming over the waves like a flash of sunlight towards a mysterious and exotic location. Jackie drew closer, and peering carefully, he saw the box contained all the parts to make the boat. It was in kit form and contained everything necessary to bring that picture to life. He paused his walk. He thought long and hard, returned to the window and looked long and hard. And then instead of going down to the beach, he returned to the cottage to speak to his mum. 2 hours later, Jackie gently opened the lid of the box, seconds after it had been placed on the small kitchen table by his loving mum. And just as it said, it contained absolutely everything he would need to build the boat. He looked up at her with that sense of excitement that grown-ups quickly and regretfully find difficult to remember. He felt so full that he could only say thank you with his eyes. And Jackie then spent the whole 2 weeks of their holiday carefully, diligently and precisely building that boat. He touched and knew every piece, and he studied the design carefully to ensure that every part fitted together exactly. He longed to see if the kit could become a real boat. As it developed, he made every part wonderful. The hull he painted a shiny white gloss with a stylish blue flash and trim. The rigging and sails were accurate and fully functioning, and the whole creation was topped by a long slim flag of sparkling yellow. He loved the whole process and the intimacy, and was so wrapped up in the construction that he didn't realise how the holiday time was ebbing away. On the night before they were to return to the city, however, Jackie knew that he had finished. He put her down and looked at her. She was all that he had hoped she would be, but he knew he had one last job to do. He took the paintbrush and the black paint, and he wrote her name on the hull, saying each letter as they slowly took shape on the hull side. A-L-I-C-E, Alice. Showing her to his mum, he said, "Can we take her to the stream to see if she floats?" "Well," said his mum, "it's far too late this evening, I'm afraid, and we do need to leave very early tomorrow." But seeing the disappointment on his face, she offered, "Perhaps if you go very early." And Jackie nodded eagerly. The following morning, Jackie took Alice in his arms and began to walk out of the cottage, down the lane, past the shops, crossing the gentle stream over the little bridge, but instead of going through the field onto the beautiful sandy beach, he turned back to that stream. He'd always imagined her being there. So gently bending over the bank, Jackie slowly and lovingly lowered Alice into the water of the stream and stood back and watched her wobble, wiggle, and then float. He was thrilled. "I made you," he said in a loud voice that you could only hear on the little bridge above him. The flow of the stream gently moved Alice just a few feet, and following carefully, Jackie walked proudly just behind her. A little gust of summer wind got into her small sails and she gathered speed, looking more and more like the picture on the lid of the box. Jackie stepped up his pace to get the best view. But after a few minutes, the stream turned into a small river, and then she really came into her own, cutting through the wind ripples like an America's Cup winner, the wind filling her sails like a champion racer. However, before he realised, Jackie was running, and running with all his might, just to keep up with her. And then he noticed that the river was bigger than was safe for him to enter. Running out of breath, he didn't know what to do. He saw ahead of him that the river had a big turn before it then emptied out into the sea next to the sandy beach where they spent much of their summers normally. And he knew he had only seconds to get her, but he just couldn't. He'd built her to float, to sail, to ride the wind. And she was capable of all these things better than he had hoped. But as she disappeared around the bend in the river, Jackie knew that she was lost to him. They had to return home to the city that morning. They went without her. Jackie was heartbroken. He couldn't forget that holiday or Alice. How could he? He had made her. Every part. 12 months later, Jackie and his mum returned to the cottage, arriving late, and Jackie was already thinking of going down to the beach. He liked imagining the walk from the cottage, down the lane, past the shops, crossing the gentle stream over that little bridge, through the field, and then onto that beautiful sandy beach. But they arrived a bit too late to go to the beach straight away, although Jackie did ask. So early in the morning, just as the shops were opening, Jackie began the walk from the cottage, through the village, towards the beach. But as he passed the shops, he noticed something in the corner of the window of one of the shops. This shop was dusty, a dirty shop. Windows that needed cleaning inside and out. And it was difficult for a child to understand what the shop was selling. But in one corner of the window, he noticed a jumble of grubby wood, string and cloth covered in dust. But what had caught his eye was, despite the dust and the dirt, he'd seen a flash of sparkling yellow poking out through what was obviously damage. He turned back, peering through the grime. He saw a long white shape amongst the broken pieces, with a blue flash, partly covered by tangled string and grey cloths. Rubbing the glass to clear some of the dirt, he saw some letters, A, L, I, and he knew. He just knew. He had made her. He rushed to push the shop door open. It was a very old-fashioned door, which had an ugly bell when the door opened. When he went in, there was no one behind the tall counter. It was too high for children. But after a moment, the man came in from the back with a lollipop in his mouth. He stopped at the door, looked at Jackie, and Jackie knew immediately that this man did not like children. The man said, "Yes?" Said Jackie, unable to speak. "What?" said the man rudely. "In the window," said Jackie. "In the window there. That's my boat." The man looked over to the dirty window display and looked back at Jackie. "I made her, you see," Jackie continued. "She's mine." The man looked again at the window display, and then he looked at Jackie and he said, "Well, she's mine now, lad. If you want her," he said, sticking out an open palm, 250 quid. Jackie couldn't move. He'd never seen 250 quid. He couldn't even imagine it. The man withdrew his hand after a moment, shrugged his shoulders and moved the lollipop to the other side of his mouth. Jackie was lost for words. The injustice, the cruelty, and yet the reality all hit him at the same time. And fearing that he could not withhold tears, he turned out of the shop and stumbled home, his cheeks burning with frustration, anger, and inner hurt. When he got home, he stared at his holiday money laid out on his bed. It used to make him feel rich at the beginning of his holidays, but now it looked pathetic in the face of this insurmountable debt. So he made a promise that day that he was to keep for 12 months. For the entire year, Jackie spent no money on himself at all. He spent none of that holiday money, and he saved every penny from Christmas and his birthday. He went out and got a small job on Saturdays in a shop with a family friend. He took on a paper round early in the morning and asked his mum not to buy sweets, biscuits and fizzy drinks for a whole year, and let him have the money instead. And every week he placed the coins and occasional note in a jar with a slot cut into the lid. It was such hard work. But he gave up all these things and all those Saturdays and all those early mornings. He sacrificed so much and never missed a day's work or an early morning paper round until, by the following summer, Jackie had £250. Just. Mum and Jackie returned to the same cottage late in the evening, that first day of their summer holiday. Jackie wanted to go down to the shop straight away, but his mum said with a smile, "It's far too late, go down early." So early next day, when the shops were just opening, Jackie set off, out of the cottage and down the lane, with a full jar of cash under his arm. When he arrived at the dirty shop, he looked in at the window and his heart jumped when he saw that Alice was still there. A little dirtier, a little grubbier, but thankfully still there. He pushed the door, heard the bell and waited for the man. After a minute, the man bumped through the back door behind the big counter. He looked and smelt the same, but he didn't remember Jackie. "I want to buy the old boat in the window," said Jackie. The man seemed unsure what he was talking about, so Jackie pointed. "Oh yeah," grunted the man. £250. Jackie placed the jar on the counter, unscrewed the lid and turned it upside down so that all the coins and notes piled up in front of the greedy man. "Help yourself," the man said, and he began to count the money he'd been given. But Jackie couldn't wait. He turned to the window and swooped up the whole bundle of precious damaged goods in a single armful and ran out of the shop. When he got back to the cottage, his mum said to him, "What's that?" "It's my boat," he said. "Are you sure?" "Oh yes," he said. "She's mine twice. I made her, and now I bought her." For the rest of the holiday, Jackie lovingly, carefully and diligently rebuilt Alice. It took every moment of the holiday. He disentangled the riggings and he washed the sails. He repaired and restored the woodwork. Knowing how she was built, he was able to repair her without causing any more damage. In fact, he was able to strengthen and enhance her design. He added small touches of beauty that he'd been thinking about for the whole year. An extra orange stripe on the hull, a second sparkling yellow flag. And the night before they had to return, Jackie realised that the job was nearly finished. So he took the paintbrush for the final act of restoration, and he tenderly painted her name again. A-L-I-C-E, Alice. And with that, she was restored. "Can I take her to the stream?" said Jackie to his mum. "Oh no, dear, it's far too late. But if you go very early in the morning tomorrow, before we go back to the city, but it'll have to be early." So very early in the morning, just as the shops were opening, Jackie picked up Alice, went out of the cottage, down the lane past the shop, and over the gentle stream by crossing the little bridge. And Alice looked magnificent in the bright sunshine. And as Jackie had walked purposefully down the road, one or two people had turned to look at this young lad with this wonderful boat. But by the stream, Jack gently bent over to place Alice in the water. He stood back, and she wobbled and wiggled, and then she floated. And his heart once again surged with pride. She was a real boat again. From the bridge, a kind visitor was watching. "Is that your boat, young man?" he asked, somewhat impressed. Jackie nodded, without taking his eyes off Alice in the stream. "You sure?" he asked. "Oh, yes," said Jackie. "She's mine 3 times over. I made her, I bought her, and now I've fixed her." Alice had slowly begun to travel with the gentle current, and Jackie went with her. But then he bent over again and he picked her up, gently taking her out of the stream. And passing the kind visitor, he continued, "And now," he said, "she's going to be with me forever and ever and ever." Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to remind ourselves of what it means to be made by a creating God. What it means that we have been made fearfully and wonderfully, as it says in Psalm 139. What does it mean to be made by someone who knows every part of you and understands who you are? We're also going to remember that we have been bought at a great price by this same Creator God. Bought at a price to rescue us from the danger and the damage and the death that this life inevitably brings. And then thirdly, we will treasure. We will treasure the fact that our God is restoring and rebuilding you and me and repairing us into something better than we ever were or could imagine. I can give you long and complicated theology, but I like that story. Because I need to have something I can believe in when everything else in the world is changing utterly. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in the weeks ahead, we're going to remind ourselves and treasure who He is and what we can truly hold on to. Amen.